Tonight we have something really good, a hot topic in the news this week. He's been charged with a crime. This is a show where I try to educate real stories. Thank you for watching Truth and Justice with Vivian King. Tonight, I'm going to leave my state of mourning and talk about Treyvon Martin. Some of my viewers called in last week and wanted to change the subject to Treyvon, and I was still in mourning. But we're going to talk about it tonight. And let me just start off by saying I am not a racist. I am an American. And I think that all children should be protected. And I have in the studio with me two guests. One is Joel Salazar, who is a well-known and famous local attorney that I know from the criminal courthouse. He is going to give you his point of view and then kind of talk about some other points of view that he's heard. And we also have Sam Milledge, Jr., who is going to give his point of view and discuss other points of view, hopefully from a younger man's perspective. So let's just get started with you, Joel. Joel's concerned about the Florida law, and so is Sam, kind of in different ways. So let's start with you, Joel.
Jury instructions are what control in what a jury says and does and decision makes. So the law should be changed as to force the person with the gun to have a reason to retreat. If the law as it stands now does not require the person with the weapon to retreat. And it's a very subjective viewpoint as to their level of fear and their subjective fear of impending doom. And there should be an objective standard which maximizes people being able to walk away.
I agree with you. What have you heard in your community and particularly the Hispanic community about that Florida law?
That could easily have been anybody with an Hispanic name, regardless of the nationality of the Hispanic person. It happens here in Texas, it happens in Arizona, it happens in California, and we feel like we are mistreated in the courts just as much as the black community feels they're mistreated, and this kind of law reinforces the subjectivity of that possibility.
Right, and since a lot of Hispanics are white and not black Hispanics, do you think that the white Hispanics feel more like the Anglos in the racial divide of the conversation?
I think that they feel a little bit safer in the sense that they might not be viewed in the same way as far as dangerousness, and they might not cause a level of fear that non-blacks might feel, right. That level of being threatened. And that goes to the fact that our country is still racist. We have advanced to a level to where we have a president whom I support, and on many levels we've advanced greatly, but on many levels we're still where we used to be.
I agree with you, and one of the things I think is important is that we open up the dialogue about it. One of my many frustrations in this is that we are racially divided in our conversation, and we refuse to talk. I mean, we refuse to honestly talk. We will never mend as a county, a city, or a nation until we honestly speak to each other about our prejudices and actually listen to the other person's point of view with empathy and understanding. So, Sam, tell me what your issues are with the Florida law as we know it.
Well, briefly, I agree with what you just said, and I think the reason why people don't want to talk is because everybody's afraid to be called a racist, and that's the big issue. I think if people would be honest, we all, to a certain extent, are racist, and I agree with what Mr. Salazar said, that even though we've progressed a lot, there's some things we've regressed on with regards to racism. Now, with regards to the Florida law, my issue is not the law itself, but it's the application of the law. Again, the key word there is the subjectivity of the law, which sometimes that subjectivity works in your favor, sometimes it doesn't, and I think it works in your favor based on your skin tone. There was a situation, a young lady who shot a warning shot in that same county of Duval County, not Seminole County, shot a warning shot, was trying to use the stand your ground law, but she did not get the benefit of the doubt with that law, and now she's doing 20 years. Of course, that case is on appeal, but my issue is the unfair application of the law. There is no standard treatment. It is not, I guess, given out equally. That's the problem that I have. You use it when you want to, other times you don't. And that's the issue that I have with that particular law, how it is applied. It is not fairly applied across the board.
And that's where we get into the racial issue again and why we need blacks, Hispanics, and other minorities in all levels of government to be judges, to be top ranked in the district attorney's office, not just at the bottom, top ranked at the district attorney's office, police officers, so that people with different cultures can see things throughout the cultural divide. So, you know, if someone black does something, someone can say, wait a minute, when we had someone high enough to say, wait, when a white guy did this, we looked at it this way. Can we figure out a consensus as how we're going to look at this? But that dialogue has to be there, and from a judicial standpoint, judges are referees, granted, but they can also have some influence in the negotiation of cases in that they can sometimes ask prosecutors, now, you know, you were looking at it this way, or you pled this guy to this. I mean, what's making you do that? And sometimes when you call people out on the carpet, they have to face some of their own prejudices or biases in the way they look at things. I think that's one of the things we can do. Now, Joel, you were also talking about something you heard about the Florida law on TV when we were off air. What was that?
My view is that this lady who came forth, one of the jurors who gave an interview and was insisting that race played no part in their decision, I just find that unbelievable. And if she just came forth and said, we were afraid of this young black man, we might not like it, but we can believe her truthfulness on it. A truth statement like that would stimulate discussion among everybody,
right,
instead of denying it exists.
Right.
And so we don't have to like that, but it's a step forward in honesty and truthfulness, and it might explain why this lady who got 20 years and was in a hostile court and a judge was using his discretion against her. This is the subjectivity in the misapplication of the law, to where if the law is, wherever possible, equally applied, everybody can feel they're getting their fair day in court.
I agree with that. That's a very profound statement. Let me just talk about another one of my frustrations. I get frustrated that everybody in these days resorts to guns. I don't understand why young people, old people, why there can't be more fistfights. Color me country. I know I've kind of brought this up before, but I'm throwing that out there, but not really for discussion right now. Let's just think about that through the night. One of the things I want to tell my viewers, since this is educational, is that I checked Florida law. A lot of people ask me, why were there 6 jurors? So in Florida, there are 6 jurors in all criminal cases other than the death penalty cases, capital murder cases. That's the only one in which they have 12 jurors, which is totally different from Houston, Harris County, or from Texas, because Texas has 12 jurors in every felony case, whether it's evading arrest in a motor vehicle, crack cocaine that's under a gram, all the way up to capital murder. And we have 6 jurors for misdemeanor cases, and misdemeanor cases are those cases where the maximum punishment is 1 year in the Harris County Jail. So that's the difference in the law. Let's talk about media bias. I am doing a lot of commenting on what I've read after the fact. I knew that Mr. Zimmerman was going to be found not guilty
I did too.
from the first report in the news, and from an experienced criminal lawyer's perspective. This is why. When the media creates the bias in every listener's hearing that the perpetrator used self-defense to stand his ground, the fix was in. Because everybody who heard that story and repeated it said, Zimmerman stood his ground, Zimmerman stood his ground. And in reality, the aggressor does not stand their ground. There is nothing in the facts, when you heard the little facts that were reported up front, with a police officer saying, stay in the car, or 911 operator saying, stay in the car, we're sending a dispatch. Zimmerman's not articulating any criminal activity or behavior that he's seen. No one's house has been broken into during his neighborhood watch. No one's called him and said, we've seen something suspicious. He doesn't see the young man doing anything suspicious. In fact, the young man is on a cell phone. And as we all know as citizens, a person is the most vulnerable when they're on a cell phone because they're not even paying attention. Treyvon could have passed by his father's girlfriend's house, walking, talking on the phone, not paying attention. So I have helped do a neighborhood watch in San Antonio, where I'm from, with my aunt, and the police came out and they train you on suspicious activity. And when you have a neighborhood watch and people are watching, what to watch for. This was about 20 years ago. And what they tell you are things that are indicia of crime. For example, most burglaries from teenagers are in 2s and 3s. They're not going to be in 1s. There's always one that goes in and one that looks out. We're criminal lawyers. We know that. Rarely, unless it's just some old crackhead that's just desperate, is generally, if it's teenagers, they're going to be in groups or in gangs. That's what it's all about. They are not on cell phones walking down the street in front of everybody. They're doing something in a secret, surreptitious manner. So he didn't have the profile of someone that was actually doing harm. So I want to throw that out and say one thing about Texas law. Stand your ground is similar to Texas law in self-defense, because Texas law says you don't have to retreat. Mm-hmm. It says that you can use self-defense if you're, in danger. You can have a reasonable apprehension of danger. It doesn't, generally it's supposed to be you use the type of force administered to you, so you're not supposed to have a gun if it's a fist fight. But if you know this person to carry a gun, then you can shoot them without a weapon. So our self-defense laws say that, but they say one more thing that's important and distinguishable. You cannot take a gun to seek an explanation. And that's what he did. He took a gun to seek an explanation. If you're investigating and asking someone a question, do you need to have a gun in your hand? Our law forbids that, and you cannot then use self-defense because you're the one with the gun. So I just want to throw that out and tell you that distinction about our law. And there was one other legal thing I wanted to tell you about the seeking explanation. How do you feel about that, Joel?
Mr. Zimmerman initiated the aggressive behavior by everybody. I think we all have concluded by the end of this case that both gentlemen used bad judgment. Mm-hmm. One had a gun, one didn't. And both could have walked away, both didn't. And a tragedy could have been averted if they had both used good judgment. Mr. Zimmerman was the older man who should have used wisdom and foresight and vision and just waited for the police. The police might have arrived and questioned Treyvon, and they would have been cleared up. Everybody would have gone home.
Absolutely. That's the absolute truth. What do you think?
I agree. I think the issue that kind of bothers me with regards to who the initial aggressor was, everybody clearly knows that the initial aggressor was Mr. Zimmerman. But from a legal standpoint, I guess since he did not make contact, he was not deemed to be the initial aggressor. Now, like I said, as lawyers, we can wrap our minds around that particular concept from a legal standpoint, but realistically, it's just hard to swallow, and I agree.
What's hard to swallow?
It's hard to swallow that you cannot clearly see this guy being the initial aggressor when you are told by dispatch, hey, we don't need you to follow him. Stay in your car, okay? To me, as a person from Greenspoint, if I see something suspicious and I know I'm by myself, I'm not getting out of my car. I'm going to stay there. I'm going to let the police know, hey, I don't know who this guy is, but he looks like he's doing something. I'm going to tell you where he's at. But I'm not about to get out of my car and confront you.
And that's what Neighborhood Watch is about. I meant to add that too. With my aunt in San Antonio and her it was an elderly community. When they started this, that's what the Neighborhood Watch is supposed to be, because most of the time in bedroom communities, nobody's paying attention when people are breaking in. So the point of watching and patrolling your neighborhood is to alert the police who are going to be there in 5 minutes. And so to me, I think there are a lot of, at the end of the last 15 minutes, we're going to talk about some corrective action, because I really don't think Neighborhood Watch should be allowed to carry guns. Because if he didn't have a gun, he wouldn't have gotten out of the car. Now, I'm not saying Mr. Zimmerman should not have his right to bear arms. I'm not saying that. But if you're going to be on Neighborhood Watch and you're acting like a quasi-policeman, but you don't know how to use a gun in a police situation because you haven't been trained to do so, I don't think Neighborhood Watch people should have guns. They should be watching, calling the police, and waiting for the police to get there, because he hasn't been attacked. This is my problem. I have an 18-year-old daughter, so my years have been training an 18-year-old and her friends. We teach our girls and boys to be afraid of weirdos, of freaks. Boys and girls can be abducted, raped, tortured, robbed, okay? Remember, Treyvon is still a teenager. Even though he's growing up, he's still, especially a mother that has sent her son to stay with the father and the girlfriend. That's a divorced mother or a single mother's worst nightmare, is what's going to happen when our children are with the other parent who's not paying attention to them. So I'm sure the mother has a lot of guilt too. So a child is thinking, Now, I didn't find it a problem, although it's offensive to white people, about the creepy white guy, because to me, that sounds like something a mother has instilled in him. You know, there's a lot of pedophiles walking around. There's a lot of abductors walking around. And he might, I don't know, we've seen different pictures of him, but he might have looked like a little skinny kid. You don't know what he looked like walking down the street. It's raining. And so he's saying, this creepy guy is walking, I keep seeing somebody behind me. Clearly, he's showing some kind of fear. So now when you become a teenager, you're not a little boy where you're going to run. You're either going to run or fight. I'm not saying he fought him. Because the man could have hit himself upside the head. So I don't even know about that. But I'm just saying, if someone gets out of the car with me and I'm a woman, I'm either going to fight them or I'm going to run. I'm just telling you, if I think someone's been following me, so to me, anybody who gets out of the car on me, they're the aggressor. That's just the way I feel. And I don't think there's any other way to look at it. Let me throw another wrench in this. I was at one of the protests on Saturday, and I think City Councilman Ed Gonzalez, who's our mayor pro tem, made a very remarkable statement. There weren't that many Hispanic officials there, but he was there and he spoke. And one of the things he ended on I thought was really important and really food for thought. He said, wouldn't it have been an interesting world or an interesting scenario if Mr. Zimmerman would have taken Treyvon home? Wouldn't it be a beautiful world if he would have said, hey, I hadn't seen you in the neighborhood before. How you doing today? Realize it's just a kid on the phone, which you could see, and just say, hey, okay, where you going? I've never seen you. I'm just Neighborhood Watch. Hope everything's good. Public safety kind of comment. And he said, oh, I'm here with my dad and his girlfriend. I'm headed home. I just went to the store, and it's raining. And he said, well, you need a ride home? I'd like to know you, figure out who your parents are. You know, we all want to be safe in this neighborhood, and we all want to care about each other. I envision that scenario.
That's a great story. And going back to your point, if we're going to profile, it's one thing to racial profile, it's another to criminal profile. And let's give Mr. Zimmerman the benefit of the doubt. He didn't racial profile, and he was criminal profiling. What you said earlier, Treyvon was walking very casually, not in a hurry, not acting guilty, not acting like he was running with any loot from any home. He was walking very casually, innocently. So somebody with a gun should not have felt threatened by him, and all he had to do was roll down the window and say, is everything okay? No gun need to be produced, no aggressive behavior or attitude needed to be displayed, and the whole thing could have been averted.
Now, I agree with everything he said except for the fact that I do think he was racially profiled, but it's tied in. I think because of his race, he also criminally profiled him based on those calls previously saying that, you know, we've had some break-ins by blacks, these little punks, these little thugs get away. So I do think He racially profiled them, but with the intention of criminally profiling them. I would have loved that scenario, but again, this is what we're talking about, where we are afraid to speak the truth on how our society is. He wasn't going to do that simply because he was already afraid and made up in his mind that this guy was a criminal, that this guy was the young thugs or punks that had been getting away with it. So he wasn't going to do that. Now, in a perfect world, yes, that's what should have happened. He should have asked him, hey, man, you know, I'm the neighborhood watch. Is everything okay? You live around here? Oh, okay, where do you live? You know, do you need a ride because it is raining? It's probably about to rain a little bit harder to get in. If not, if Treyvon would have said, no, I'm okay, I'm right here, fine, everything is over.
Right,
but
do you mind if I watch you go home?
Right,
I'll just
right,
be behind you, so
right, but,
no big deal.
But it's unfortunate, but again, this is what I'm talking about. We have to have that dialogue, and we have to be real with ourselves. Anybody that does not think that this case significantly involved race, you're fooling yourself. You really are fooling yourself, because I hate to say it, but if the shoe went on the other foot, you'd definitely be screaming.
And the thing that hurts me is that the media will bias the public so Zimmerman would get off, and they know that more people will listen because they've created this racial subtlety in everybody's mind from the day Zimmerman was arrested. But, you know, nobody says, like to juror number B37, what if your white son was walking down the street and a black man was the neighborhood watch and he got out with a gun and decided white boys have been shooting up whole schools, terrorizing, killing 3 and 4 and 50 kids at a time. And I think if I don't watch him, he's going to be another one of these people that just start shooting up everybody in the neighborhood. And so I need to get out with a gun and ask him what he's doing, and he ends up dead. What do you think that I want the media to ask these white people that question? What do you think? Would you really think that it's not racial and he should be found not guilty? That's what I want. I want the media to ask the real question, because what the media doesn't understand is we're not, as black people, being racial. We're in mourning. We're hurt. Just like the white jurors thought Zimmerman looked like their brother or son or friend, and all they could see is that boy, like juror 37 says, and calling Mr. Zimmerman George, like that's a personal friend. All they can see is protecting Zimmerman, George, as the juror is saying. Well, what we see is a child. We see our nephew, our child, someone that has to grow up, someone that still needs to be guided from childhood to teenagehood to adulthood. We see that to be any of our kids. My daughter has had a few friends get killed at Lamar High School. I've watched her pain and her agony, killed with guns in innocent situations, not being thugs or gangbangers. So it's painful to us, because that could be my son. And fortunately, what I can say for most black people is we can even see the white kids as being our sons. But unfortunately, what I'm in mourning about also is white America can't see Treyvon being their son. Let's take a call. Caller, thank you for calling. Turn your volume down and talk into the receiver, please.
Yes. I'm just speaking about it's life.
We can't hear you unless you turn your volume all the way off.
Okay, I'm speaking about what's going on. Life is going to be like it is. We always going to be racially profiled and brought down, especially the black men. And there are whites that do compromise or sympathize with us. But the way life is, the way I see it, and I'm almost 50 years old, life is not going to change unless there are people out there, mainly the white, white people, that will see our view. But there are none that people I've come across, they don't see our view. So when that comes about, life will change. But life is not going to change for us, especially, like I say, black men.
Well, one of the things I want you to do when you talk to people is kind of do what I just said. Create the same scenario and change the races of the people and ask them what do they think should have happened.
Yeah, but I understand what you're saying. I just caught that on what you said about, change that scenario. If you change that scenario, nothing will happen. That white jury, they would bring up maybe 5 or 6 black women and 1 Hispanic woman, and they still may sympathize with that white boy's family, you know.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, thank you for
Because I'm saying,
your call.
You gotta understand that.
Yeah, we understand.
Way life is. I mean, like I said, I'm going on 50 years old, you know, and I've been racially profiled through jobs, as well as through my peers, through my neighborhood, you know, and life is not going to change, especially for a black man.
I hear you. Thank you for your call. I appreciate your comment.
May I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
And I want everybody to understand, especially in the black community, this is not just a black and white problem. I agree with what Joel said earlier. This is a minority issue. I can tell you the number of my Hispanic friends that go through the same thing. And this is an issue that's not just black and white. This is an issue that all minority men. Now, yes, I've been profiled as a black person. Still get profiled. And I had to pull out my bar card on them, let them know, like, hey, not today. But this is an issue that we feel in the minority community. Like you said earlier, that could have been somebody of Hispanic heritage and would have been the same thing. And it goes on all the time, you know. So I agree, but then I disagree with what the caller just said about that. Where, to me, it can change because soon our Anglo friends aren't going to be the majority in this country. Who's going to be the majority? It's going to be the Latinos, okay? You have a huge Asian influence coming up. You have more black people coming up. The problem is what we have to do as minorities are get in these positions and exercise our power. And it doesn't just stop and start at the president. We're talking about the local government. We're talking, like you said, judges, you know, district attorneys. Those are the things that can make the change to those particular laws and just make a change in our culture. But it's not going to start until people understand that this country has a history and is still holding on to racism.
Let's take another call. Caller, please turn your volume down. I'm about to talk to you. Thank you. You're on. Thank you.
Yes, my question is where is his family? If they're not saying anything, and then what's going to come on the outcome of this? Yes, we started talking about Treyvon. Now, we all heard bad enough that it did happen to him. But my concern is it's pointed on Treyvon. He's the innocent one. So they're not announcing this man that did this. Why is that?
I don't understand. What do you mean? You mean Zimmerman?
Zimmerman.
He was found not guilty.
He was found not guilty, right?
He was found not guilty, but he was a party too. Trayvon walking down the street by himself, blah, blah, minding his own business. But I don't understand.
Why didn't they charge
They
him?
ain't saying anything about this man. Where he at? What are they doing?
Well, I think what she wants to... Caller, if I understand, what you're asking is where are his whereabouts now and what's going to happen after he's been found not guilty. Is that what you're asking?
That's exactly what I am. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. So answer that. I don't know.
Unfortunately, nothing criminally can happen because it would be double jeopardy. The only thing that the family can do is sue him civilly. But in Florida, they allow you to immune yourself behind the stand your ground where you'll be immune to any type of civil suit. So,
but they can, I think, sue, and they might have done this already, this homeowners association. I've heard through the grapevine that the homeowners association already settled with the family because stand your ground is one thing, but that doesn't pierce the corporate veil of the homeowners association because he was acting in the color of a homeowners association patrolman, not in the color of an individual that's just got threatened and confronted. So I think that there could be some litigation in that regard. Let's take one more call. Caller, you're on. Thank you for calling.
Hello.
Hello.
The difference between this case and what makes it more important than Sandy Hook is that Sandy Hook, just nothing that I believe in could be done to knock the NRA back on its heels a bit. But in this case, for instance, George Zimmerman should have been tox screened.
I agree.
At least that would have been taking a lot of the wind out of this case if they just didn't done that in the beginning.
I agree. You can talk about Trayvon's toxicology report because he's dead. Even if he had marijuana, it's a downer, and Zimmerman didn't know about it at the time. A trial should be a recreation of what people know about, not all those other collateral issues. But I think it would have been interesting to know what Zimmerman's toxicology was.
And it's these horrible stand your ground laws. It's the worst part is the immunity in a civil trial. He'll never get on a stand and have to defend his actions on that part.
And I think that's why the Fed's doing something, looking into it, but I doubt if they do anything because, Obama's administration is passive about racial issues. So I don't think there'll be the reaction that there was with Rodney King in California.
Well, they were passive about the Second Amendment until Sandy Hook.
Right, exactly. So I don't think that they'll do it. But I appreciate you calling. I haven't talked to you lately. Thank you. Thank you. Let's talk about Obama's speech. I was just talking to another lady lawyer before I got here, and she said she has a white older man co-worker lawyer who she thought on a scale of 0 to 10 was a 7 or 8 in terms of not being racist or understanding, even though he might be 65, 69. But she sent him Obama's speech about the race relations and Treyvon, and she asked him, did you look at it? He said, no, I didn't open it. I've never heard it, but it's divisive, and I'm angry about him making a speech. So that's fodder for discussion. Now, why would a white male be angry about Obama's speech and saying it's divisive without even hearing the speech? What do you think, Joel?
Because he's feeling guilty about his own feelings and doesn't want a black person in the position of President Obama even implying that this country is not racist, or that there still exists racism in certain pockets of our country. And President Obama is president of everybody, not just the black community, and he's taking that into consideration. Perhaps there are certain blacks who think he's being too diplomatic, but if he got more aggressive, then he'd be called a racist in that way. Mm-hmm. He's got to set a precedent and a standard for future black politicians that ascend to that level as to their statesmanship and to stay cool despite the political pressure.
That's true.
You know, that's not the first time I've heard of somebody saying it was divisive and is vulgar without even hearing it. Quite honestly, I think they say that based on Fox News and some of these more conservative, stations that just basically give them the talking points that they want them to have, and they just go with it. There was nothing divisive about that speech. It amazes me when President Obama does make speeches like that, people are quick to say, well, he should just focus on politics. But now any other time you want him to comment on it. I think the way that he handled it was very diplomatic, and you're right. There are some blacks that feel like he is not being, I'll put it out there, Tavis Smiley, Cornel West, more so Tavis Smiley, feel like he needs to be doing more for the black community. But my answer to that is he's not just the black community's president, okay? And if you want another person of minority stature to become the president, then you don't want them to say, well, wait, we can't vote so-and-so in because he's just going to be the Mexican person's president, or he's just going to be the black person's president, or he's just going to be the Asian person's president, or hell, he may just be even the gay person's president. Right. You're the president of everybody.
Exactly.
He handled it right, and I thought it was some emotion. Like he said, that could have been him. Because despite him being biracial, America sees him as a black president. Don't you guys find that odd that he is biracial, but we just refer to him as the first black president? Well,
what I find odd also is that white America knows he was not raised in black America. Mm-hmm. He was raised in Hawaii, not black, by a white mother and white grandparents, white. So his thought processes are more Anglo than black. I want y'all to understand that. But because he sought his black roots to learn about them, after college he moved to Chicago. He chose to study constitutional law. He chose to understand about the inner city. He chose to take a black wife. You know, black America wouldn't have been mad at him if he had a white wife, because he wasn't raised in Chicago or Houston or, Dallas or, the continental U.S., really. I mean, he's over in Hawaii. So I think that sometimes white America expects too much of him. I think black America doesn't expects him to be president of everybody. I think there are black men like Tavis Smiley and Cornel West that are jealous of him. Mm-hmm. Cornel West, I'm sorry, that are jealous of him and will criticize any and everything that he does for their own talking points. But I think that his speech was important because it could have been him. So he's trying to acknowledge his blackness. He also said that the jury did the right, he respects the jury's verdict. Now, if someone respects the jury's verdict, that's not divisive, because we've all had trials where prosecutors have lost and they are mad at the jury. When the prosecutors in Harris County lose, for the most part, now there are some with good sportsmanship, but there are a lot of them that will storm out, throw books, say the jury's stupid, and even though they might only lose, 5% of the time, they don't take it with maturity.
Right.
So let's take one more call. Caller, thank you for calling. Caller, you there? Yes, sir.
Hello?
I can hear you.
Yes, hello, I'm here.
Okay, what's your comment?
Yes, my comment is on elaborate about President Obama. I think the speech he made was significant. But anything he do, the Republicans try to, tear him down, which is not right. And Fox News, they're real racist. Okay, man. And that's coming in about Treyvon Martin. I don't see a whole lot of them elaborating about like the white jurors and one, I think it's Spanish. Why the prosecution let them sit up and pick 5, whites? That's. I think they passed that law years ago, didn't they? Did you comment on that?
No, sir. I'll comment on it, though. In Texas, the jury system is that whoever has a driver's license is randomly selected for jury duty in the county that you live in. It's not voter registration. It's your driver's license in Texas, okay? So everybody has one, so that should give us a bigger pool. But it's up to you, caller, and me to go to jury service. A lot of blacks and Hispanics don't show up. And a lot of whites believe it is their civic duty to pay their taxes and go to jury duty, okay? And we are not civic-minded enough. So who knows? Everybody black that got a summons that day might not have shown up. Or just a few showed up. So understand jury selection. We don't, as lawyers, pick the jury. We ask questions, not about the specific facts of the case, but we make hypothetical fact patterns. We talk about the law that applies, and if people make comments to show that they cannot be fair and impartial, they get stricken. So the defense strikes their number. It's a specific number, and the state strikes their number, and we both turn that strike sheet in to the county clerk, and the clerk has a master sheet, and they says, okay, Vivian, Joel, and Sam on the defense team struck these 10 people. And then the prosecution, they'll take the prosecution's list and put it on the master, and they struck these 10 people. And the first 6 jurors in Florida are the ones who are the jury. So neither side knows who's going to be on a jury. The only thing we can do as defense lawyers is make sure that nobody got up that we struck. And that the prosecution hasn't struck somebody black for racial reasons versus something that they said that implied that they could not be fair and impartial. So you need to come to jury duty and be fair and impartial. Your comment.
I agree with that, and it boils down to it. And he touched on something briefly, and I don't know if you've talked about this, but a lot of people are complaining to me about, well, the prosecution mishandled the case. Oh, man, it was just a terrible job. Like I said this on the radio station not too long ago, personally, and people were saying the system failed us. I don't think the system failed. I think the process failed. And what I mean by that is anytime you have a homicide, okay, and the suspect remains at the scene, I don't know of any county in this country where it's going to be 60 days before they arrest him. Not only that, I don't know of any felonies where you bypass a grand jury indictment. Okay. I also don't know of any police department that after a week of investigation says, you know what, we're done investigating. We really don't want to do this anymore. I don't know of a district attorney's office that declines prosecution where you have to go some 100 miles north to bring down a prosecutorial team from a different county. I've never heard of that. So to me...
And it should have some blacks as the prosecution.
Right.
This is a racially charged issue, and they needed to talk about race in their jury selection. And when you have white prosecutors, when it's a racially charged, when we allow the media to make this a racially charged situation, then you have to have someone that has the nerve and the guts to talk about race.
Right.
And I'm going to give you an example about that after I take this call. Caller, turn your volume off and then talk directly into your telephone. Thank you.
Okay, great. Good evening. I just want to make a comment as far as like Cornell West and Tavis being like jealous of Obama. I don't think that they was actually jealous of him. But for us to support him overwhelmingly like we did, for every constituent of people that voted for him in large blocks, he did something for the gays. He tried to pass some kind of law, tried to give them some meat. He tried to give them something. He did something for the Mexicans. He tried to do something as far as with them being able to come over here and things of that nature. So he specifically has never did nothing for us, even if it's just an inner city initiative for jobs or something. So he can do it for everybody else. He did something for Wall Street. He did something for this person. I mean, these group of people and that group of people. And he acted like he was one of us to get our votes. So at first I used to be like, why is Travis, why Savage and them coming at him like that? But now I really understand because he haven't did nothing for us.
Okay.
No, he don't have to.
I'm gonna stop you right there. That's not true. And Tavis Smiley promised $1 million over at TSU and to do that communication school. Did he finish that? I just want you to think about that. President Obama did do some things, and remember, people are not overwhelmingly supporting him. They thought he was the best candidate at the time. And in our democracy, we have been taught in America that once the Republicans and the Democrats finish their fist fight, we act together as a democracy. What people are frustrated about is not that we're all think he's done everything right, because I am in control of my destiny, and I have to do what I have to do for my county and for my city, and that's why I do this show, to educate us and give us a voice. This is my part, and you need to do your part, caller. But he gave us a stimulus plan that put money into the Texas economy and to build roads and to give jobs. Bush didn't do that. Obama did that, and he took a lot of flack for doing that. He gave us affordable health care. I've been one of those people for the last 20 years caught in the trap that I can't afford insurance, really, but I need insurance because I'm self-employed. So there are a lot of things he did. When he got in office, they had cut out money to HBCUs, that's historically black colleges and universities. He specifically put that back in the budget when he got there in 2008. So I can go through a list of things that he's done. So he's done things targeted to the black community with the HBCUs. I'm sending my daughter to one next year. I'm glad in August. I'm glad they still have them. So, and the stimulus, Texas said they didn't want the money. Perry didn't want the money 4 years ago. In the end, he begged for the money, and he got the money, and we deserved the money because Texas is a huge state. That means we're paying all those federal dollars to D.C. When D.C. decides to do something for the country and put that federal money back into our roads and counties, we are stupid not to let Perry say, oh, we don't want our part of our federal dollars back. Give them to Delaware that's this big. Give it to Iowa that's this big. No, we're big. We have a lot of people. California, Texas, Florida, and New York pay the majority of the taxes for this country. So every time the government gives us something back, it's just giving us our own money back, okay? So let's think about that. And when you hear, what makes me sick is I hear the conservatives saying, oh, I don't want the money. Hell, it's our money. You're not representing us if you say that. That's just stupid. So I'm upset about that because Obama did a lot of things. And if you go to Obama's website or any Democratic website, you'll see a list of things that he did that helped the minority community. You have a comment about that?
I really don't have a comment. I don't think he understood and knows the facts altogether, but that's
the facts are there on the internet.
Yeah,
let's talk about the jury selection process and Rachel Gentile, one of the star witnesses. As a former prosecutor, one of the things I have to say is there had to be a prosecutor that was racially sensitive, that prepared the prospective jurors, that's when there were 60 of them, for a cultural difference in the witness, okay? For example, there could be a gang shooting. In a gang shooting, prosecutors know that everybody got a record that's going to be the witness. If it's the Crips versus the Bloods and somebody gets killed, all the witnesses are going to be gangbangers, right? So prosecutors know that they have to prepare jurors, for example, saying, can you set aside the fact that someone has tattoos, they've been to prison 5 times, and set that aside and listen to what they say and decide whether they're believable or not based on what they say, their demeanor, and whether it makes sense? Or would you automatically be biased against them because they have tattoos, because they're in a gang, and because they've been to prison? That's one of those questions that's asked to the 65 prospective jurors. Half the people are going to raise their hands and say, no, if they've been to prison, I'm not going to believe them. That's what a prosecutor is supposed to do. And those are people who cannot be fair and impartial, and those are people that have to be constitutionally stricken. What I believe happened here is this prosecutor did not talk about Rachel Gentile. She was culturally different from most of the whites that showed up. So they needed to make a hypothetical fact pattern and talk about her. If she's from Haiti, if she has a heavy accent, if she seems disparate or unconcerned, do you think that that will affect the believability of someone because she's culturally different from you and doesn't react the way your child would act and doesn't speak the same way your child would speak? Would you be offended, or can you understand that a black child that's from Haiti might speak differently and keep an open mind and listen to what she has to say? That had to be dealt with on voir dire, and that's where the prosecution made mistakes. And experienced lawyers, that's what we're talking about, because I would put money on the fact that that prosecutor didn't talk about that, did not prepare, have a jury that said they could be open-minded to a person that was cross-racially different. Let's take a call. Caller, you're on. Please turn the volume down and ask us your question or make your comment, please.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
How far as the Affordable Care Act? Is the Affordable Care Act, have you really...
We're not going to talk about that tonight. We're only going to talk about, Treyvon. Do you have a comment about Treyvon?
Yeah, I got a comment about him also.
Okay.
Do you think the reason that it's been an overwhelming outrage about Treyvon is because it's been mediaized? When we have all these situations, I don't value, since we've been in this country, there's been millions and millions of our people been killed. Why don't we have outrage and try to stop the violence in our own neighborhoods, along with everything else happening with the police? The police do it to
Let me ask you this, sir.
To each other. Thank you.
We have to just do it ourselves. I mean, there is outrage. Are you still here? Okay. Well, there is outrage and there's comment, and that's why I pay to produce this show, is so that we can talk about these things. And I talk about something every Wednesday, and I've been doing it since November of 2011, so that we can have a voice, so that the media can, me being part of the media, can bring a different side to it. And you're welcome to call me. My phone number is going to be at the end of these credits, and you can come tell your story and what you think is important. What do you have to say, Joel?
Going back to the prosecution's preparing for trial, the prosecutors, they should have foreseen that this young woman would project a negative image, and because this white female juror who spoke was speaking for the entire jury, they perceived her as being lacking education.
And what does education have to do with witnessing something?
It had nothing to do with it, but these prosecutors should have foreseen, because these were not young men, they were seasoned prosecutors, and they should have foreseen that, and they should have asked, how many of you are going to hold it against her if you believe she's lacking education because of her language, of her inability to speak perhaps like you do? Will you hold that against her?
Exactly. And if they would have said yes, then they would have been stricken. If they would have said no, the prosecutor then has to remind them, if they make it on a jury in closing arguments, that you are the jurors that said you wouldn't hold it against someone if they sounded different, if they were a different color, if their education was different from yours. That's what a seasoned good prosecutor does, and that's what I didn't see here.
Well, let me clarify something. When I made my comment earlier about the process failing, I wasn't saying that the
yeah, and
the
I'm
state,
not talking about you.
Yeah.
This is the comment that's on my notes.
Oh, okay,
no,
yeah, because
they
clearly made some serious mistakes, and one of the things that really bothered me was the lack of preparation that their witnesses had.
Right.
For the most part, most of their witnesses seemed like they were defense witnesses.
Yes, they were.
Right, and when you go over that, you're supposed to go over that with your witnesses, and you're supposed to go over them. And another thing they could have done is, just like the prosecutors do here, they could have had a psychologist come on and talk about her mental state.
Correct.
Was she in shock when it happened? Explain cross-racial communications. Explain flat affect. They do that all the time with prosecution witnesses in rape cases. You can explain why some people seem dull, offensive. Why do they appear offensive? Because they're culturally different, they feel afraid, they're intimidated, and some people's intimidation throws off negative vibrations in a system that they don't trust. Remember, her friend that she's innocently talking to ends up dead. I mean, do you think she really trusts white America? Does she really want to be there?
One of the different characteristics of Florida law was in criminal cases, the lawyers are allowed to take depositions of all the witnesses. So these prosecutors knew that their chief investigator was not fully on board with them, and they didn't avoid calling him as a witness. And in fact, when he was called, he went fully on board for George Zimmerman, and he was the defense star witness. So that's analogous to in L.A. when Christopher Darden asked Robert Shapiro to put the glove on before trial. He tried putting it on, it didn't fit, and then during trial still asked O.J. to put it on.
Crazy.
That's incompetence, that's negligence, and perhaps somebody who just didn't care. I don't know if these Florida prosecutors put that much thought into it other than just trying to get a conviction and thinking that this jury would be less than thoughtful and just take the path of least resistance.
That's good. We have just 7 minutes to wrap up, so I want to throw out some possible solutions. And join in, chime in whenever you want. First of all, we need to get more involved. We need to vote. We have a city election coming up in November. That's for our mayor and city council persons. So let's not ask the same old tired questions. Let's ask the mayor candidates about the police chief, about more minorities at the top making decisions, about their policy with Neighborhood Watch. Let's talk about the things that affect our community. Anal cavity searches on the side of the street that the police officers do and they lie and say they don't do. When you're in your civic clubs, talk to the politicians about what they're going to do to address those things. We can always do that. We can do that with our congressional people, our legislative people, our city people, but this is a city election year. Neighborhood Watch should not carry weapons. I just think that ought to be a city ordinance. That's what I'm saying. Another comment that I have is, in our Neighborhood Watch programs, we need to have little block parties. We need to know who the kids are in the neighborhood. We need to know who our kids are, black, white, Hispanic. You know, we all work hard, we come in, and we don't know who our neighbors are. We should know who our neighbors are. I think that would make us a better community. Check out who the kids are in your community. And don't always go to a gun. I just think that's a bad thing to do. But make sure our politicians, like when I was a prosecutor, from 92 to 95, we think that the ones that are there, we think that there were always 14 blacks out of 200. Is that really a good racial mix in Houston? I mean,
not here.
Not in Houston. And so, and they're mostly at the bottom, so they're not in any decision-making capacities. And that's why sometimes you have some culturally different views about things. So should there be a number like that? Talk to your DA about the number of blacks that are there, or if there are not enough blacks, or if they can't find qualified blacks, I guess, about your cultural diversity. And are you really conscientiously charging people the same? Or are you a part of the media bias?
Or are you overcharging?
Are you overcharging? Because the bias is there, and what frustrates me is white America thinks the media is what everybody thinks. It's not. What white America has to understand is most blacks don't think the same as what we hear in the media. So we feel like our whole lives are infiltrated by someone else's thoughts, because that's not our thoughts. We have our own thoughts, and when something comes up and we react to it and y'all hear our thoughts, then you feel like we're being racist. We feel like the media is racist, but we listen to it every day because it's not the way we think. So there has to be some empathy and thoughts on both parts. And I wish that we would be less reactive and more proactive. That means go to jury duty. That means make sure that you're fair and impartial. So guys, what are your closing remarks? We have 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 2 minutes each.
If the Florida prosecutors had gone to the family, the Martin family, and asked how they felt about offering Zimmerman probation, because they couldn't make a murder case, and best case scenario, manslaughter case, they might have thought it over and realized it's better that we get him on something rather than nothing. They were very greedy in trying to get that murder case, and then they weren't even aggressive in the process.
Right. I agree. And I think it's because they had civil lawyers helping them. They didn't have criminal lawyers. You know, when you have civil lawyers, they're just thinking about the money part, and they really, civil lawyers are so different from us as criminal lawyers. You know that. So I think that was a problem, too.
Well, I agree with Joel said on that. I mean, they were greedy. They overcharged, which is a common problem, not just in Florida with district attorneys, but here especially with overcharging. Again, there were some things that happened. This law, like I said, I stand by what I say. I think the law needs to be applied fairly. Right. If you're going to have that law, fine. I also want people to stop making an excuse about the right to bear arms. I don't think people understand the history behind the Second Amendment. Right. The Second Amendment was enacted in order to protect you against militias. We no longer have that threat. Right. So you can't use that every time something goes wrong. Say, oh, my Second Amendment gives me the right to bear arms.
So what do you want me to do? Say you're threatening me and shoot you now? I mean, you know, because that's basically what it makes it. It creates vigilantism.
And that's what it does. And I agree. I like your idea about the block parties. And what I want people to start doing, too, is learn up on your local people that you're voting for. Right. You have to learn up on them because that's where the real change is going to be. D.C. is so far away from us. But in order to get to D.C., we got to start here, like you said, with the mayors, with your congressmen, with your senators, with your governor, with your district attorney, just a lot of things, your attorney general. All that stuff is very important, and it has a huge impact on us. So
he's still showing 2 minutes, Joel. Come on back. You want to say something else?
I think if we had more block parties, we can prevent the Ariel Castros of the world from maintaining slaves for 10+ years.
Really? I agree. In fact, that's an idea I came up with during this process. And when my aunt's group in San Antonio started their neighborhood watch, they started having block parties. They actually wanted to know each other. And so they all started, you know, they were all elderly, all of mixed race because, you know, blacks and whites had moved into the same neighborhoods, but they didn't know each other. And so they started having parties where 2 or 3 people on the block would cook. And they'd go kind of from house to house and figure out, and they did that about 20 years ago. And my aunt, that was always a black hairdresser, started doing a white lady's hair down. You know, we usually don't go to different hairdressers. She started doing a lady's hair, older white lady's hair in the neighborhood, and they became friends. So I realized I'm going to do my part in the next year to have a block party.
Count me in.
It's amazing what food can do to bring people together.
Oh, yeah, I know it. And a lot of people have them at Christmas, you know, like 12 days of Christmas, and you go to different people's houses, but maybe not in the same block. So I think we need to remember what democracy is and remember that we should agree to disagree. And in the words of my congressperson, I'm not a racist, I'm an American. I can still mourn for something you don't mourn for. I can still cry for something you don't cry for. I can still be concerned about something you're not concerned about, but I'm still important. Treyvon is important. I'm not saying Mr. Zimmerman's not important, but I'm just saying that guns and adults, like Joel said, and children are different. And trust me, white America and black America, 75% of our kids never get in trouble. Black men never get in trouble. You hear all the bad, you know, stories, but most kids are just being kids. They're just trying to grow up. And so give them the benefit of the doubt. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree.
So we're being told to wrap it up. Thank you for listening. I know I was supposed to bring another show tonight, but they canceled on me. So thank you guys for coming at the last minute, Joel, and giving us your great perspective.
My pleasure.
And Sam for giving us your great perspective.
Thank you. It's always
a
pleasure.
And thank you for watching and giving your opinion. And remember, we all have to do our civic job. We can always talk about the other person, and I'm going to bring it to you. But I'm also going to try to think of a solution and do my part. Thank you for watching Truth and Justice with Vivian King, and we'll see you next Wednesday with another very interesting and thought-provoking conversation. Good night. Thank you for tuning in again. Tonight we have something really good, a hot topic in the news this week. We've been charged with crime. This is a show where I try to